Okay, welcome back to part 3 of chapter 2 on problem solving. So we're going to continue talking about overcoming functional fixedness and mental sets. So as you may remember from the previous video, we were talking about functional fixedness and how it can really be difficult to overcome that sometimes, especially if we have a lot of experience with familiar objects. Right, we think about a hairbrush just to comb our hair, or as another example would be, you think of, a fork, right? You use that to eat food, but if you ever watched Ariel, you could also use it to brush your hair. So that would be an example of overcoming functional fixedness. So we think about certain objects in certain ways, and overcoming that really means overcoming functional fixedness, which can really be helpful sometimes, especially when you're trying to solve a unique problem. So mental set, again, is this preconceived notion, right, based on previous experience. And we use that to solve problems around us, but sometimes it really, doesn't help us, right? Because sometimes we need to overcome that to come up with a new solution to a problem that we've never seen. So in your book, they're talking about the water jet problem, so I would encourage you to take a closer look at that. I actually found a video from Die Hard where they were kind of tackling a similar problem. Of course, their stakes were much higher. I think there was a bomb at stake that they were trying to disarm. So let's take a closer look at that video real quick.
I carry your heart with me.
I carry it in my heart.
I trust you see the message. It has a proximity circuit, so please don't run.
Yeah, I got it. We're not gonna run.
How do we turn this thing off?
On the fountain there should be 2 jugs. You see them? A 5-gallon and a 3-gallon. Fill one of the jugs with exactly 4 gallons of water and place it on the scale, and the timer will stop. You must be precise. 1 ounce or more or less will result in detonation. If you're still alive in 5 minutes, we'll speak.
Wait a sec! I don't get it. You get it?
No.
Get the jugs. Obviously, we can't fill the 3-gallon jug with 4 gallons of water, right?
Obviously.
All right, I know. There we go. We fill the 3-gallon jug exactly to the top, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, now, we pour that 3 gallons into the 5-gallon jug, giving us exactly 3 gallons in the 5-gallon jug, right?
Right. Then
Okay.
what?
Now, take the 3-gallon jug. Got it, exactly 2 gallons in here, right?
Right.
Leaving exactly 1 gallon of empty space, right?
Yeah.
A full 5 gallons here, right?
Right.
You pour 1 gallon out of the 5 gallons into there, we have exactly 4 gallons in there.
Yes.
Pour it in there, come on. Come on. Don't spill it. Good. Exactly 4 gallons.
You did it, McLean.
Put it on the thing, get it down.
All right, so quite dazzling, right? So they saved the world with their logical thinking. So make sure that you review the water jet problem in the book as well, as it's explained quite nicely. All right, so moving on. When we try to solve problems, right, it's not always done in the same way. As I already mentioned earlier, there's always typically these 3 stages, right? The initial stage where you're presented with the problem, and then you know what the goal is if it's a well-defined problem, but then you also need to overcome certain obstacles, or in some instances, intermediate steps. So for some problems, right, there is no kind of one-step solution, but it's actually going to require multiple steps. And in some instances, it actually requires us to, move further away from the solution to actually finally get to the end solution. One really great example of this would be the Tower of Hanoi problem. So there are specific rules that you need to play by. So as you can see here, in the initial stage, we have these 3 pegs, and all 3 discs are arranged from largest to smallest on the first peg. And the goal state should be that you have those 3 discs on the 3rd peg, again arranged from largest to smallest. But there's also certain rules that you have to play by. So you can only move 1 disc at a time from one peg to the other. You can only move a disc when there's no disc on top of it, so you can't take one at the bottom and move it, so it has to be the one on top. And then last but not least, you can't put a larger disc on top of a smaller disc. Okay, so I'm going to give you a second to think about this, and then I'm going to show you the solution. And this is a great example how sometimes you actually have to almost work backwards, right? Sometimes it seems like you're closer to the solution, but then you have to actually get further away from the solution to get to the end goal. Okay, so now that you've had a second to think about it, let's take a closer look. So here we have our 3 pegs on our 3 discs on the first peg. So we would move the smallest one to the 3rd peg, and then we would move the middle one to the 2nd peg. And now we have to work backwards, right, and take the little one over to the middle one, and then, of course, move the largest one over to the 3rd peg, right? So this is actually, now we're getting closer because this is where we want this to be. And then we again have to work backwards. We put the little one back on the 1st peg, and then it's really simple from there, right? You take the middle one from the middle peg, put it on the last one, and then, of course, last but not least, take the little one and put it over on the 3rd one. So you have it like you want it, right? On the last peg and arranged from largest to smallest, and we stuck to all the rules that we had to play by. So this is really a great example of how we sometimes actually have to accept that we get further away from the goal state to finally get to the end state. Another great example of this would be means-end analysis, where you're really working step by step to reduce the difference between the initial and the goal states. And that's especially important if there's certain rules. So if you actually Google means end analysis, sometimes this is actually also referred to as an IQ test, although I don't think it's not a standardized IQ test, but it's what they're claiming it is on the internet. So if you search for this, you can certainly find this. It's actually a game. So they have here a family of 4. So there's a mother, well, actually, it's a family of 6, I should say. So there's a mother, a father, 2 girls, and 2 boys. And then you also have a police officer and you have a robber. And the goal is that you want them they're initially all on this side of the river, and you want them to all be over on the other side of the river. And the rule is that only 2 people can travel on the raft, and only the father can travel with the boys, and only the mother can travel with the girls. And the little girls have to travel with an adult, and also the boys have to travel with an adult. And then the thief can never be left alone, and the thief is transported by the police officer. So if you enjoy these types of things, I would highly encourage you to actually go online and find this. It's actually a lot of fun to play. And there obviously is a solution to this problem. Sometimes it takes a little while to play to figure it out. But if you enjoy games, I think you'll really enjoy this. And I'll give you a little hint. Sometimes in this case, right, you bring people over, but then you think initially that once they're over, you're going to leave them over. But sometimes you actually have to work backwards and bring people back over to stick to the rules. And work your way closer to the solution. All right, so I'm going to stop here, and what we have left is talking about how experts and novices solve problems differently, but we're going to be doing that in class next week. All right, have a great weekend.